if someone's coming to you saying it's all about ChatGPT, you can forget about everything else. I wanted to be able to highlight that that's actually not true. And if anything, there's other arenas within AI or just technology, I should say, that have more applicability within a business today.
You are listening to CEO Perspectives, a podcast by the Conference Board.
Welcome to this episode of CEO Perspectives, a signature series by the Conference Board. CEO Perspectives are conversations that take an objective, nonpartisan look at a range of subjects that matter most to business leaders. I'm Steve Odland from the Conference Board and the host of this series, and in today's conversation, we're going to discuss the next evolution of AI, autonomous transformation, how leaders should be thinking about AI strategy, and where should they be focusing their investments. Joining me today is Brian Evergreen, the founder and CEO of the Profitable Good Company and a senior fellow at the Conference Board. Brian, welcome.
Thank you, Steve. I'm glad to be here.
So, Brian, tell me a little bit about the Profitable Good Company. I know it's a leadership advisory company and so forth, and you're working on AI, but our listeners probably want to hear more.
So the reason I founded the Profitable Good Company when I left Microsoft is that I wanted to be able to partner with leaders that were hoping to harness the economic and societal potential of artificial intelligence and bring to bear the experiences that I had had at Microsoft, Accenture, and working with many of the world's most valuable companies. And the title is a little bit, indicative of sort of maybe my values, which is that I love doing good in the world, and I believe that you can do a lot of good things profitably. And often leaders are asked to choose between profit and good, but often they need to be able to answer to their shareholders or to the leaders within their organization for profit. And so the sweet spot of profitable good is something that I've been working on for a while now, and that I'm excited to partner with leaders to be able to go create.
Now, you have an interesting background because you came from studying music theory and composition, and you had several stints in places like Amazon and Microsoft, as you've mentioned, but then you ended up being an expert in AI. How do you make a transition from music to AI?
That's a good question. So I would say that my music, in a way, it makes sense in retrospect, which is that in music is a systems discipline, first and foremost. And it's, especially with what I study, which is music theory and composition, is a very technical. It's combining the creativity with the technical discipline of composition. But for the end goal of doing something in music, especially of expressing and creating something beautiful. And I would say that if you translate that into an AI context, there's obviously a lot of systems thinking required to be able to even choose which initiative is the right one for AI. But then you need creativity. And then also AI is a very technical discipline. So in terms of how I made that transition, a lot of it was actually luck and being very persistent. And to every time that the quotation about preparation meeting opportunity. And that's sort of where I think that I just followed that path over and over again until I got to where I was.
Now, you're also the author of a book called Autonomous Transformation, Creating a More Human Future in the Era of Artificial Intelligence. Tell us a little bit more about AI and your work there and why you wrote the book.
So the work that I've been doing in AI, I've been working on AI since before it was, well, not before it was called AI ever, but before everything in the market had been rebranded AI. So I was working on it when it was just advanced analytics. And I would say that it started as just building out solutions for clients at Accenture, and then through a couple of boutique firms. And then at those boutique firms, a couple of my biggest clients were Microsoft and AWS. And one of my former clients at Microsoft moved to a new position and said, "Hey, do you want to lead US AI strategy for Microsoft?" And that would mean flying out to Fortune 500 C-level executives and helping them set their AI 2030 agendas. And I'd been in the weeds as a practitioner and a leader of a practices. And I thought that's a great opportunity to be able to elevate those discussions and sort of bring my superpower of strategy from my background as a chess player into bear in this discussion. So that's sort of how I sort of got into some of the leadership positions within AI that I've held. And then in regards to the book, at that time in 2019, I said, okay, we've been on this journey for 8 years now, from analog to digital, but digital doesn't imply any level of intelligence. It just means now it's digital, right? And so I felt like the next phase beyond digital was autonomous, when machines can make decisions autonomously without needing human input. And so that's why I for a while now, I've been talking about moving beyond digital transformation to autonomous transformation. And that's sort of one of the core principles, obviously, in the book, especially in the title, right?
There's some interesting points that you made there. One is that AI is really a rebranding of what was happening already. There's a lot of people who think AI just descended upon us, and and ChatGPT is the latest, is it. But it's not. It's been computer programming, machine learning. It's been essentially evolving over a long period of time, and most recently been rebranded. I really love the way that you articulated that. And then autonomous transformation is just another articulation of the use of AI and these other digital tools, right? And so that's so your point in this is how do you get to, and it's really not only transformation, but it's innovation and growth in the business. So how do you use these tools in order to drive your business, essentially? Am I summarizing that accurately?
Absolutely. I would say I think that there's a lot of harm that's been done in terms of the amount of hype that's been paired with some of these things. And it's led to what I call a digital fog, where there's a confusion about who to trust, what's real. And I think that there are those who economically benefit from that fog, and from saying, reaching out in that fog and saying, I can pull you through this fog and you can just rely on me, and also, sign this very, very good sized, statement of work for that. Right. And so, but I think that digital transformation has become, the phrase has become, it's grown to the degree that it means anything that plugs into an outlet, and is often termed some form of digital transformation. And so I think that we have, there's also a lot of initiatives where we're going from analog to digital, but we're not actually transforming anything. Like you mentioned, it's not just about transformation. And so for those, I actually went back to the roots of the words, and I started with a definition and looked for a word, which was the definition being, you're significantly improving something, but you're not transforming it or changing the nature of it. And so what would the word for that be? And it's reformation. And so I actually in the book write about how you have digital reformation, which I think many, many initiatives that are currently called digital transformation are digital reformation. Then digital transformation, autonomous reformation is moving from digital or analog to autonomous, but reforming it and not transforming it. And then autonomous transformation. I think we still haven't had our sort of iPhone moment on the stage of here's this autonomous transformation use case or example that everyone can point to. But I know there are organizations working in that direction. And then lastly, transforming and reforming, assume we're starting with something that we're transforming or reforming. There's also acts of creation, where based on the value that we're trying to create in the market, we can't necessarily start with what we have and transform or reform it. We need to create something new.
It's really interesting. I don't think of myself as being very old, although my children would probably disagree. But, I learned how to use a slide rule in high school, used a calculator late in high school and early in my career. Spreadsheets were paper. Along came a computer, started using computers. And then, we started taking work and figuring out, okay, what do you do with these computers? I remember when the boxes landed, the first PCs landed in our offices, we all kind of looked at them and said, well, gee, isn't that pretty? What the hell do you do with it? And so the whole point was, there needs to be software. You have to train people how to do this. And, it has evolved from there. And so people kind of forget that this is just, one more step in the evolution where, it's not that computers get smarter and smarter. The latest Mission Impossible film has AI taking over the world, and understanding and being inside your brain and all this kind of stuff, which is great for science fiction, but we're not to sentience yet. I mean, what we're doing, and who knows, we may not be there ever, or at least not in our lifetimes. The point is that it's the evolution of these tools and how you use them in business. And so you don't get caught up in the AI, whatever the latest and greatest definition is, and everybody's got it's got this kind of AI, this kind of AI. It's basically using computers and the software on them in order to drive analytics and decision making and inform how you can run your business better, take care of your customers, and so forth. And so I really like the way that you have kind of simplified it to back to basics.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And it reminds me of something that I didn't actually write about as per se in the book, but I've written about since then, which is that if you think about AI, because in response, I think, to a lot of the noise in the market right now, if you think about machine learning and the concept of teaching machines, if you abstract it away from all the technical details and say, okay, ultimately what we're trying to do with getting, whether it be starting with data, we're trying to get machines to be able to make decisions. We're trying to recreate some semblance of our expertise as humans so that we can offload that decision or offload that analysis that informs our decision to a machine. And so if you break it down, I think that if you break it down to the way that we as humans learn, we start with acquiring language around something. And then, like, if you think about with children, we say, okay, this is the sun, and this is a ball, and this is right. And we explain language for everything. And then over time, then that can become knowledge. Like, that ball in the sky is the sun, and we're on the earth. And then, when you feel, and then that can become, we move beyond knowledge to understanding of when you're in the sun, and I know this intimately, I have a 4-year-old, when you're in the sun, you can get hot. And if you jump in a body of water, you can cool back down. And we're starting to learn understanding. And if you translate that to the way that we think about as leaders in terms of machine learning and trying to recreate expertise in machines, language is the very first step, right? Just like it is with humans. So the fact that we've gotten really sophisticated with language lately, that doesn't mean that we've gotten to the point where machines have all this knowledge, let alone understanding. And so we need to go along that same journey arc. And so for leaders, if we think about as humanity, we start with any new topic area, we do the same thing. Even as grown-ups and experts, we say, what's the language we want to create around this? And then we seek knowledge and we do testing. Then we eventually, hopefully, get to a point of understanding. Once we have understanding, we can build expertise and then operationalize that expertise. And once we've operationalized expertise, then we start to get enough data that a machine can learn from that data to recreate that semblance of expertise, which frees us as humans to go to the next area of exploration.
If as I listen to you describe all of this, basically what you're saying is let's automate as much as possible to shorten the amount of time it takes to make decisions. And it reminds me of whenever it was 50 years ago, if you had a question about something, you had to go find the right library, you had to make a trip, you had to go in, spend several days,
right,
digging through all these books in order to try to find what you were looking for. It was shorter if you had a great librarian to help you. Now you just pick up your phone and you plug it into your search engine and you have an answer in milliseconds. So that's an example of, how we moved just within my lifetime. I keep saying that because it's such a short period of time. And so what you're talking about is the continuation of that evolution is simply, right?
I think so. And the one caveat I'd add to that is that I think that there are organizations who will automate anything and everything possible, and they'll learn by feedback from the market that there are certain touch points of human experience that are critical. So I think customer support is one area that we've already seen this arc where people tried to go full IVR or tried to go to full, chatbot. And they learned, okay, my customers are leaving for a competitor who, when they call, is within seconds is reaching an actual human who can talk to them. And so I think that industries and sectors and organizations will sort of feel out and learn this is an area where the human experience of connecting with another human around our brand or around our product or service is critical. And we cannot by any means, what we can do instead is equip that human with lots of tools to be able to find the answer faster or be able to better support that, that client or customer. But I think that, that those who go full automation for everything possible will end up needing to do a recoil back to that, preserving those critical human experiences.
We're talking with Brian Evergreen about implementation of AI and autonomous transformation. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to transform your business and stay ahead of the competition? Artificial intelligence is quietly reshaping the global economy, optimizing manufacturing processes, and transforming how users interact with popular platforms. Harnessing the power of AI can exponentially enhance your business's effectiveness and efficiency. However, navigating the risks associated with this transformative technology is critical. Privacy, integrity, the economy, and humanity are all at stake. That's why the Conference Board is your go-to resource for the expertise and foresight you need to leverage AI to its fullest potential and make strategic moves that propel your business forward. Unlock the possibilities AI offers your business. Visit tcb.org/AI today to access trusted insights for what's ahead and guidance on navigating the AI transformation.
Welcome back to CEO Perspectives. I'm your host, Steve Odland from the Conference Board, and I'm joined today by Brian Evergreen, an expert in AI and autonomous transformation. So, Brian, recently you wrote an article that said ChatGPT is not your AI strategy. Why did you write that article? What were you trying to say to CEOs?
I wrote that article because I felt protective of the types of leaders that I've worked with who were being sold maybe some form of snake oil. And I felt like I wanted to sort of cut through the noise and say, hey, if someone's coming to you saying it's all about ChatGPT, you can forget about everything else. I wanted to be able to highlight that that's actually not true. And if anything, there's other arenas within AI or just technology, I should say, that have more applicability within a business today. And also now that all this focus and attention is on these large language models, there's freedom, there's more opportunity, there's talent that hasn't been tapped right now, where there's a lack of focus, that organizational leaders who can find those other areas that could be critical to their business where they can invest will be able to have a leg up in those investment arenas because of the fact that all the attention and energy and focus is currently pointed towards large language models. That's why
I'm really glad that you did this. And I think for all senior business executives, you're probably hearing, oh, ChatGPT, and because I was going, oh man, I'm way behind. I can hardly spell ChatGPT until I downloaded it. And I downloaded it on my computer, I downloaded it on my phone, and then I started using it. And it's really just sort of a glorified search engine. So I think it's a step above. It comes at it from a more useful language, and there are things you can do with it. You can plug it in and ask it to write speeches and generate. It's generative AI, meaning it can generate some content, but it just scrubs what's out there, and it just uses what's out there. So I think what I think we have to continue to do is demystify all of this, because I think that that techies just love to rebrand things, call it this, call it that. Look out, AI is going to take over your world, and people are going, "Oh man, I'm so far behind." But you've got to simplify it and really boil it down to what this actually is.
That's right. I mean, even if you think about before the techies were doing this, as you call them, if you think about 50 years ago, the hot new thing coming out of GE or the hot new thing coming out of wherever, and the new product with the late night TV infomercials, and you got to buy it right now, right? I mean, we've gotten to a point now where we see that, we immediately know what that is. And I think that with tech, it's a little bit different because of the way that, you can get your hands on something and people do get really excited. And there are valuable applications. And you get a taste of the potential and you think, oh my goodness, what if we could truly harness this whole potential, the potential of these technologies? But I agree with you completely. I think that in terms of, the article that you mentioned, ChatGPT is not your AI strategy. I look at it like a piece on the chessboard. It's like if we were playing chess and I have a background as an internationally competitive chess player. And there's a rule in chess tournaments that if you pick up a piece, you have to move it. It's called touch move. And so if you pick up a knight and, without thinking, you just grab a piece and pick it up and you look around for where you're going to put it, it might be that because you did that, now you're going to lose because the next move they can get checkmate that you could have protected against if you hadn't picked up that knight. And I think it's the same thing with ChatGPT is we shouldn't just pick up the piece and look for where we're going to put it on the board. We should start with what's the vision that we have for the future of our organization and our market and our sector. And the value that we want to create. And then work backwards from that vision to say, okay, what strategies do we need to put in place? And then backwards from the strategy to planning and then tactics. And then at the very end, we can determine which pieces enable the rest of that, as opposed to picking up a piece and looking for, where we're going to put it.
Yeah, and I think it's important, especially for senior executives to have this demystified and to work to say where do we want to invest. So how would you advise senior executives and boards of directors to approach this? Let's just say I know nothing about AI. I've just learned how to spell AI, and it's really scary. But I know that my company is supposed to be doing it, because if I don't do it, I'm behind competitively. How do you get started? What do you do?
What I would say is the first step is to, in some ways, ignore the hype as much as you can, and to start with the question of forgetting any and all technology, imagining with your organization and the sector that you're in, what is the future of our sector? What is the next stage of value creation that we would like to create? And that's the first thing I would do, is start with setting a vision. And sure, having technologists in the room that can help do that art of the possible exercise, as long as they're not trying to sell you something. So maybe an external advisor that's objective, or internal advisors that are just trying to, again, you could say this is just about setting the future vision for where we're headed, or where we might want to be headed. And then I would say work backwards from that to determine, okay, which are the piece of what's available today? What is it that we could invest in that would accelerate that vision that we've set for the future? And how do we create the right cohesive strategy to do that? And I would say at the same time, something about Microsoft's culture, Microsoft's transformation that people, I think, have begun to hear, especially those who visit Microsoft's Executive Briefing Center in Redmond, but also I think it's also making its way into the media. But there's this critical moment in 2014 when Satya came into the office and CEO, and he said to one of his, and I wrote about this in the book, I had the opportunity to interview one of his top leaders for that transformation, who said, Satya called me into the office and said, okay, we need a new business strategy, we need a new technology strategy, and we need a new people strategy. So at the same time, these three are interdependent, right? And at the same time that he set the new business and technology strategy, they also immediately set a new culture or people strategy. And I think that a lot of times we focus in on the business strategy, or we focus on the technical strategy, or we say, oh, we have a people problem, but gosh, what are we going to do about that? That's, we can't of course, we can't necessarily put the same layer of strategy on there that we can for our financial plan. But I would argue that that's not true. And Microsoft's a great example of that. So that's the first thing I'd say, is just to start with those three, but anchored on the vision of the future of the sector and of the market that you serve and your clients, not necessarily reacting to something they're asking for, because clients only want to resolve current pain points. They're not necessarily setting vision for the future of something. Like no one was begging for the iPhone when Steve Jobs got up and announced that.
No, he says he was famous for saying marketing research doesn't work because they can't conceive of the things that I'm inventing for them. And there is some truth to that. It's not that you shouldn't have some consumer feedback along the way and input, but I think your point is, don't set out to have and say, what's my AI strategy? You say, what's my strategy?
Yes.
And then what are the tools that can help accelerate and advance that strategy, including XYZ and AI.
That's right.
Is that a fair summary?
Yes. Absolutely. For instance, Underwriter Laboratories, I worked for them for a little while. And I assume you're familiar. They're anything that plugs in the US basically has to go through testing and certification from them to be allowed to be sold in stores, to make sure that when you plug it into an outlet, it doesn't explode or light on fire. And an example with them is, sure, they could start with what are the things we're going to do with AI and look for opportunities to do that. But digital twins is actually because of the fact that organizations all over the world have to submit files and representations of their products to UL and physical products to be tested. But if they were able to submit a first principles, like a physics-based digital twin of their products first, or even throughout the development cycle to UL, to be able to quickly, without even necessarily needing human eyes, be able to run testing on that, then at the final phase of actual physical testing, it can be greatly accelerated. It can shorten the time to market for their customers or their clients. And that's an example where you could say, Oh, if we started with AI, you wouldn't end up there. You start with your core competency and the value that you create, and how could you better create that value with all that's out there, and all the potential and capabilities that are being developed. You can shortcut to that value, and it may have nothing to do with AI.
Well, therefore, if you go back to my metaphor of when we started using personal computers, back in the mid 80s, when these beige boxes showed up on our desk, rather than saying, what's your computer strategy? You say, what's your strategy, and how can we deploy Microsoft Office to speed things up, make things more efficient, help our customers, and that sort of thing. It's not a perfect metaphor, but it's kind of the same thing. So rather than make AI this mystery, let's just think of it as software tools, and not unlike where we were. And it's, it's like another upgrade. What can we, once you have your strategy, what can you do with these tools to advance and accelerate the strategy?
That's right. And I'd say, instead of using, I think a lot of times we look at these technologies and we say, what problem can I solve? So that we look around within our organizations and say, okay, let's create a big list of all of our problems, and then we'll see if there's any of these that AI or that these technologies can eliminate. And at worst, that means, we don't end up finding necessarily a lot of value to create. At best, that ends up, with trimming our existing value proposition. But like I mentioned before, that's not going to get you on stage and having your own version of an iPhone moment for your company. So instead of saying what problem can I solve, looking out into the future and saying, okay, and I call it future solving, but it's a framework that I wasn't the first to come up with. I've just, given it a new name and tried to recontextualize it, but looking out and saying, what is that future that I want to create for the market? And I think that by starting with that question, instead of starting what problems do I want to solve, it can become clear which technologies or I think some organizations might find that they need a little bit of analog transformation in some of the work that they're doing, where they went digital in an area and they realized, wow, we're losing customers. So we need to peel that back.
Well, and it's just like when, the companies came out with CRM solutions, customer management solutions, where you plug this stuff in, but it didn't match your workflows. So you didn't end up using, the tools adequately. But you have to think about the tools in conjunction with your workflows and your work processes, and sync them up. So you have to think holistically about, how you implement this stuff. And that's why you said that, I think you've written that only 13% of AI initiatives so far have actually been successful. And I think part of it is because they say, well, let's do AI, rather than saying, all right, yes, what tools are out there? And don't call it AI, what software tools, what automation tools are out there to help us achieve our strategy. I think that's the whole point of what you're trying to communicate.
That's exactly right. And I'd say that an example of that too is in the agricultural space, where they basically have invested heavily in developing these tools that are, that can predict from satellite imagery or from drone imagery. They can say, okay, it looks like this crop is suffering from this disease, and this is what you need to do. Or, and they've invested heavily. Then they go out to the farmers, and the farmers want nothing to do with it. There's no interest, right? It's true. And it
doesn't plow the field. And at the end of the day, they've got to get the crops in.
That's part of it. And I think another part is just the cultural history for that farmer. Most farmers today, in at least in the US, and I'm guessing more broadly, but my familiarity in this space is more in the U.S. It's a generational, right? They've lived on the farm. This is their land that their people have been caring for generations. So the idea that some new person that doesn't know anything about their family or about their history or about why would they be listening to them? Right? You can't get a machine to recreate this expertise that I have, right? This is it's tied to their identity even. And so I think that's another piece of it, is to your point about AI, in these technologies, is that people want to push it in any direction they can. And even when they're able to get something that's significant in terms of the value that it could create, if you haven't accounted for the social aspect of how the people that are working with that information or with those machines or whatever it might be on the factory floor or on the front lines of a retail company, those people, if you're not thinking through and accounting for their experience, then even if you have a great implementation that the technology's sound and it's ready to go, it's still going to fail.
Great Great advice. Brian, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thanks to all of you for listening into CEO Perspectives. Every week, I'll be joined by a prominent thought leader to provide insights on the issues of our time. We'll cover the leading subjects in geopolitics, economics, public policy, human capital, and more. Please share CEO Perspectives with your colleagues, with your friends, with every chatbot you run into. I'm Steve Odland, and this series has been brought to you by the Conference Board.
You have been listening to CEO Perspectives, a podcast by the Conference Board.